Okay, I'm here with Nick Kapoor. Nick is running for state rep in the 112th seat. The 112th consists of Monroe and Newtown. Um, on a personal note, one of my first interviews outside of Danbury and outside of covering the congressional races was for the state rep in the 112th back in 2008 and also in 2010 when Michelle Mount was running for the race. So this seat is a little near and dear to my heart. But Nick, great for you to have the time to talk to us today. And I just want to get a little bit of background on you before we get into specific questions. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me today. My name is Nick Kapoor. I'm running in the 112th special election on April 13th. I started in politics about 10 years ago in Monroe, joining the town committee. I was on my local town council for about 3 years. I also currently serve on the Board of Education in Monroe, and I'm entering my fourth year as a commissioner on the statewide Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities. We are the state agency in charge of eliminating discrimination and prejudice throughout Connecticut. And so I've lived in Monroe my entire life, and I would love to be able to take my hometown's voices up to Hartford.
Also know that you interned up there at the General Assembly. You interned for Chris Liddy, correct?
Yes, I interned for Chris Liddy in the 2011 session. Chris represented Newtown in the 106th district. It was an eye-opening experience being his intern, being up at the Capitol, and being able to interact with legislators and constituents, and really getting a behind-the-scenes view of how the legislature works. And that internship actually um, really invigorated me and really opened my eyes to public service and to wanting to serve the public and be a part of the solution.
Now, when I think about the 112, I'm trying to think about things I talked about with Miss Mount back in the day. Um, One of them was definitely transportation. What would you do to address the concerns regarding transportation in your district?
So specifically in my district, we have two really main state roads, which are 111 and 25. And there's a lot of congestion on both of those roads. As the next state representative for the 112th, I want to get the state down here. I want to talk about how we can ease some of that congestion. 25 is a big commuting corridor because it connects the connector in Trumbull and Bridgeport all the way up through Newtown and keeps going. Um, but we need to ease some of that congestion in Monroe. As a state rep, I also want to look at the infrastructure and transportation plans for the whole state. And this has been an issue on the state's plate for decades. And if we want to have really good transportation infrastructure, we have to invest in it. We have to make sure that we make it a priority. Senator Will Haskell just took over the chairmanship of the Transportation Committee from Carlo Leone, who resigned. And I think that's a great move. Will represents the 26th state Senate district with Westport. There's a lot of Fairfield, lower Fairfield County people on the Transportation Committee. We have to talk about Metro North. You know, Will always says that it takes longer today to get from Grand Central to New Haven than it did 30 years ago. That's not okay. We had a huge influx of people moving in from the New York suburbs and exurbs into Fairfield County. And we want them to stay here, but people are commuting, people are driving around, and we need to make it so that people can have enjoyable experiences in their transportation, in their day-to-day lives. But we have to invest in it, and we have to keep the money there to do that.
You're talking about investments, and that brings up another issue that was at least a big issue not long ago was the issue of tolls. People like talking about transportation improvements and improvements to our infrastructure, but that costs money. Do you support tolls? And if not, how would you pay for these initiatives?
So I want to see what happens with the federal lawsuit that is pending in Rhode Island on truck tolls. I'm very weary of tolls on regular passenger vehicles. Um, the other side of me says that we are the only state on the eastern seaboard that doesn't have them. And when we travel through Massachusetts and New York and New Jersey, Connecticut citizens are giving their money to these other states But when those citizens from the other states come into our state, they're not giving us their money. Um, so currently, I would support tolls on trucks, but I wouldn't support tolls on passenger vehicles. Now, uh, the way to pay for some of these infrastructure things is we need to make sure that we are getting all the possible infrastructure and transportation dollars from Washington. A lot of the money from the federal government can come in for transportation infrastructure projects. And that is one way that I really want to make sure that that happens.
I know there's a lot of concerns in regards to transportation in that area, but I want to pivot just a little bit and get back onto education because you have experience being on the board of education in your area. Um, how does your experience in education, how will that translate in regards to addressing concerns in your district? Because, a lot of districts talk about ECS funding, for instance, and how they feel that they're not getting enough money back from the states to take care of their educational needs. So how does your experience on the board of ed, how will that translate in regards to advocating for your constituents in regards to education needs?
So being on the board of ed over the last about 15 months now has really been eye-opening, especially with what's been going on with COVID. Um, my belief on education is it shouldn't matter where you live in Connecticut, you should be able to get the best education possible. And I think if you look at the state of Connecticut, we have some of the most segregated school systems with regards to rigor, with regards to race. And that's been shown in study after study. Then, if you go up to Hartford and you look at ECS funding, sometimes suburbs like Monroe and Newtown um, are penalized or don't get the full amount because our towns are in better fiscal health than some of the other towns. Um, so, as a suburban legislator, there's definitely many things pulling on my thoughts about education. At the end of the day, every student in Connecticut needs to get a great education, and we can do it. After the pandemic started, we saw former state education commissioner and now United States Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, and our governor close the technology gap for all students in the state of Connecticut. Um, we need to do the same thing and make those same investments for all of our students in the classroom. Um, it's vitally important. Education, I truly believe this. I'm a professor of math at Fairfield University. My partner is a high school math teacher. Um, I am very, very involved in education and pro education. And we need to make sure that when the state says they're going to send a dollar amount to the towns for their education budgets, that's the number that comes. Because a lot of times the state will say, you're getting this, and it's this minus 100,000. But the local towns budgeted off the number that the state gave them, and then we have to make something up. So the state needs to send down the number that they gave in the first place.
Another topic that's happening in terms of education is the open choice program. Where do you stand in terms of open choice?
So open choice, we also had another discussion about regionalization a couple years ago. Um, I think open choice is excellent in theory. I want to make sure that it's the same in theory that it is in execution. And I think one thing that I have found on the Board of Education about executing programs that we come up with is getting community stakeholders involved. Some of the best policies that we've put in place in Monroe is when we had students and teachers and administrators and parents all sitting at the table and having an open discussion instead of the Board of Education at a meeting voting 7-2 or even 9-0 on a policy that the community might not have buy-in on. So I want to make sure everybody is sitting at the table on something like open choice. As far as regionalization goes, my idea for regionalization is that school districts should not be prohibited from regionalizing if they want to. A couple years ago, there was a bill that said we're going to force you to regionalize based on probate districts.
Right.
That's not a good bill. My idea is that if school boards want to regionalize, at least 2/3 of the membership of the Board of Education plus one member have to vote to regionalize. And what that would do is it would force a vote to be bipartisan, and both boards of education should have to make that vote. So in Monroe, for example, we have a 6-3 board, 6 Republicans and 3 Democrats. Under my proposal, if Monroe wanted to regionalize with Easton, for example, at least 7 members of the Monroe Board of Education would have to vote to regionalize, which would force it to be bipartisan at the local level. And once you have super majority majorities on both boards of education to regionalize, then they can start the process. But there has to be buy-in from the community, and there has to be buy-in from both local political parties at the local level, not at the state level.
Let's talk about the big elephant in the room right now, which is the pandemic, COVID. And if you are elected to the state house, you're going to be thrust right in the middle into the middle of the situation. Thankfully, now we're at the vaccination stage where a lot of people are getting vaccinated, but we still have a lot of issues in regards to COVID in our economy. There's a lot of businesses that are hurt, that have been negatively impacted by the closing of their establishments due to regulations coming down from Hartford. Where do you stand at right now with the governor's approach towards COVID? Do you support the easing of restrictions that are going to be happening on March 19th? Or do you feel that protocols should still be in place?
I think that a year ago, when governors across the state kind of took the reins of state government, I think that was the right decision. I think in times of crisis, we need one voice, and I think the governor did the right thing. I think that our governor throughout this entire process has really been transparent. He's been holding his weekly press conferences. I'm pretty sure every week for several months, if not the entire 12 months since this whole thing started. He's answered many questions from the press. I think his executive orders last summer and into the fall were correct. I think now where we are, as you said, with vaccinations, I believe the governor's March 19th date to start opening things up a little bit more is also correct. We see people in Connecticut who are getting vaccinated. We see our schools opening up a little bit more. Here in Monroe, we'll be discussing at our board meeting on Tuesday. It was already discussed once. It looks like we're going to be bringing in all of our students that Monday after April break, which I think is excellent. Our district has done amazing things for our students in our schools, for hybrid, for people who wanted to come full in, for the elementary schools. It's really been a nice phased in approach. And I think what the governor has done by opening up offices, opening up restaurants on March 19th is the right way to go. And if people don't feel comfortable going to some of the places that the governor is opening up on March 19th, you still have the choice not to go. But it allows people who want to go the ability to go. With regards to helping our small businesses, I'm a vice president of operations in my family's small business in Shelton, Connecticut. We build software systems for insurance companies. And I have seen firsthand what COVID can do to a Connecticut small business. I think the federal government has been very helpful with the PPP loans to small businesses. I think the American Rescue Plan that was just signed by the president last week, that has billions of dollars allocated to the restaurant industry, to the leisure and travel industry, are really good provisions of that bill. Some of our restaurants are hanging on by a thread, and we need to help them. There's also money in that bill for states and cities, direct payments to states and cities, and that is also really going to help our localities get back to full, 100% with that money. So I think the governor has done a very good job managing this pandemic, and I think that his opening up this upcoming Friday is the right way to go. And I'll just reiterate, if you're not comfortable going, you obviously don't have to, but as more people get vaccinated, I think that we need to start opening up safely, continuing with masks and social distancing, of course, for several more months until we can get to herd immunity and feel much more safer going into the mid to late part of the summer.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I asked you that. So no matter what happens, you are supportive of the continuation of using masks and social distancing.
Yes, I think that until we reach that, critical mass of herd immunity in the vaccinations in our community, we do need to continue wearing masks in public, um, and we need to continue social distancing. Um, we should just be following the CDC guidelines. I can't wait until I can get my first shot and have, family dinner on Sunday nights with my family again, hoping that will come in the next 1 to 2 months. But small gatherings with people who are vaccinated, even right now, is okay. But in public, we need to keep wearing our masks. We cannot let our guard down so much that there's even a small resurgence, because we're almost there. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Let's get there together, and we'll have a great it'll be a better future if we can do that.
Your district historically has gone towards the Republicans. Um, so it's fair to say that your district is not very far to the left, but more center right. So if elected state rep, obviously you're a Democrat, how do you strike the balance between, let's say, representing your district and upholding some of your values that you have as a Democrat?
So I think that our representative government, whether it's at the state level or at the federal level, only works when our representatives represent our constituents. Um, I think that as a member of the town council and as a member of the Board of Education, I've been able to show my constituents that I can work across the aisle. I vote no on items. I break with my fellow party members when I believe that they're not right for the town. Um, on the Board of Education, at least in my town, we're not a very partisan board, really, at all. A couple meetings ago, we had 3 or 4 votes that broke. I mean, there was one party line vote, but the other 3 broke all over the place. Um, and up in Hartford, I am committed to voting against proposals that I don't think do the best for my district. I understand that there's pressure from, legislative leadership to do things. And when you're on committees, sometimes votes can be very close because you're not voting, in the whole house. But we're elected to represent our constituents. And that's what I have been doing. And that's what I plan to continue to do. When my personal beliefs are in contrast to the values and the beliefs of my constituents, I want to hear from them. That's the only way that this works, is when you hear from the people you represent. And I want to have a conversation with them. Um, and then I'll vote on what they told me to do, and what I think is best for the district. And the best thing about representative democracy is we have an election every 2 years. And so I hope that I can create a great record, show the people I represent them, and they will get a say on me representing them again.
So I don't want to hold you up anymore. Thanks you so much for running for this seat. I know there was times when there wasn't even a Democrat running for the seat. I'm happy that somebody's running, and as I hear from talking to insiders and people in the know, that there is a pretty good chance that a Democrat can finally pick up this seat in the 112. So hopefully you are the person to do it. Thanks a lot for your time again. I really appreciate it. And once again, a shameless plug. If somebody wants to find you on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, just shamelessly just let me know your contact again.
So Facebook and Instagram is at Nick4CT. The website is nick4ct.com. Volunteer tab is on there. As you said, we're going to flip this district, but we need everybody's help to do that. We have to do the work. And if we do that, we will have a blue election night on April 13th.
All right. Well, look, thanks a lot again for all your time and taking time to talk to me. I really appreciate it, and best of luck to you.
Thanks so much. Thank you.